Peeps, welcome to another video. Today it is part 4 of the Necessary Clutch sew along. Today we are going to be assembling the flap and outer body of the bag. Let's get started. Okay, we're going back to the very beginning, which is step 3, and making the exterior. So to make the front flap, you want to get your front flap pieces, and I'm going to work with the directional ones because this is the one that you need to make sure that you end up with the right bird in the right position. So this is the inside and that's the outside. So you want to place those together, right sides together, pin it, and then sew all the way around at 1/4 inch. Now the pattern recommends that you take the 1/4 inch seam allowance off of your interfacing pieces. I haven't done that. I don't do that. I don't find that I need to. You can, and that will also give you a really good guide for your stitching line when you're having to stitch all the way around as well. So there is that option. But yes, we want to pin this and sew it together all the way around the edge, leaving the bottom end open. Once you've sewn your two pieces together, you're going to want to notch into your curves. Personally, I like to use my pinking shears and just trim close to the stitching line all the way around. There we go. So everything is now basically notched, and you're going to then turn it right side out, and you're going to press it. So this is the, oh, missing a corner there. Thought it looked a bit funny. There we go. So this is the inside, because my bird is that way up when I have it the flap facing that way, and then when I close it, bird's going to be facing that way. So that's the way that you want to have your directional prints. So I've pressed my flap, and as you can see, it's still quite bendy and wavy, and that's where this stuff comes into play. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to take a piece of your very firm interfacing, and mine is obviously curled up, so I'm going to use the curl to my advantage. So I'm going to trace around my bag flap, and I'm going to then cut within that tracing line so that the piece will slide into the flap, and I'm going to do it in such a way that the curl goes on onto the inside, if that makes sense. So this is the inside of the bag flap, the curl's going to go that way. This is the natural way that the bag is going to close, so that just working with what you've got just makes your life a little bit easier. So I'm going to trace around this and then cut it out. So there's my flap piece traced out. I'm going to cut around that within the line, probably around about 1/4 inch inside that line, so that it will slot easily into the flap that we have just made. So I've cut it out, and then I've cut out probably, that's more like maybe, yeah, about 1/4 inch out. I may need to trim it down a little bit more, but I'm going to try and work it into the flap. As I say, you want to use the curve to your advantage. So this is the interior, so you're going to want your bag piece to curve like that. So, and again, trying to do this through the viewfinder is going to be interesting. Nearly impossible, so I'm not going to look at the viewfinder. Yeah. Right, so it fits. That's great. I didn't trim anything off of the bottom edge, and I will do that once I've top stitched everything down, because then the stiffener is going to be held in place, hopefully, by the top stitching. So that's what we're going to do next, is top stitch around this edge all the way in the same manner that you did before. I'm going to use my blind hem foot for that, as I did before, and yeah, top stitch away. Top stitching is done, and now we need to install the turn lock, which is ever so slightly terrifying. So take it slow, cut away less than you think you need to, and work up from there, because if you cut too much, you'll have to make yourself a new flap and you will curse. So for this particular part, you're going to need your turn lock, and you're going to need this part of your turn lock, and you're going to need a screwdriver, and you want to take out and not lose, again, ask me how I know, your two little screws, and then you're going to want the piece with the 2 holes in it when we're going to use this as a template for cutting out our hole from our bag flap. So we're working on the inside of the bag flap, and you want to find the centre of it. You can use a ruler to do this. I personally like to fold mine in half and give it a bit of a press, and that gives me my centre there. And then you're going to place the inner part of your turn lock over that. You want it to be about 1/4 of an inch down from your top stitching, and you're going to trace around the centre, the holes and the outside of your turn lock. Okay, so I've traced around all the different parts of my turn lock, so I've got the 2 circles, the inside and the outside. And what you want to do is you want to cut away the majority of this, but not so far to the outside line that you're going to weaken the holding place for your turn lock. What I suggest you do is you start by cutting out this central piece here and then trim away a little bit extra. I'm going to use an awl to punch through these holes here, and I'm going to push it all the way down, so that will help get these holes to the right size that they need to be. And then I'm going to use my very sharp scissors to cut away the rest of the fabric from this part here. This is the scary part. Don't rush this. Take less than you think you need, check, and then trim away a little bit more. If you trim away too much, you will need to start again and make yourself a new flap, which is the last thing you want to do. So I use my awl to punch through the holes. I then used my very sharp scissors to cut away the excess fabric. I'm going to, oh, I've missed a bit, so I'm going to need to trim that bit out. I'm probably going to have to trim a few more bits out, but I'm going to try my lock in it first and see how that's fitting. Okay, so you're going to want the front piece of your lock, which is the one which has got the smooth edge and no visible holes, and you're going to want to get your camera to focus and wiggle this in. Now, as you can see, I'm going to have to trim away quite a bit more from those areas, but so I'm going to need to trim away from here and here, but this edge is looking really good, so I'm going to leave this one alone and I'm going to trim over here. Okay, so this is actually, believe it or not, looking pretty good. I can just about see both of the holes that the screws need to go through. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to run fray check all around both sides of this hole that I've just cut to help everything stay stuck together and to be able to tuck it in to the inside of this kind of rim that there is here. And I'm going to use my fray check for that, and then I'm going to use my awl to help put all the little bits and pieces in. This is the fray check I'm using. It's by Prim. Ooh, that nozzle needs a bit of a clean. There we go, that's better. And I'm just gonna run that all the way around the edge of the hole I've cut, flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. Let that dry for a couple of minutes, and then you want to try and screw your turn lock in. This is going to be really difficult to do on camera, so I'm not going to attempt it, but what you want to do is you want to put your face piece of your turn lock on. You want to push any excess fabric down into the rim with your awl. You then want to take the back of your turn lock, put it over there. If there are any stray little threads, get rid of those with your awl, push those in, and then put your 2 screws in and tighten those up as tight as they will go. There is something I think called screw lock that you can put in as well. It's like a glue, so it's a tiny little dab of that, and you put that in, and it just guarantees that supposedly guarantees that your screws will not unscrew. And again, ask me how I know. I have lost a screw out of one of these locks before, so that is also a nice added thing that you can do. I don't have any of it, but there is that possibility as well. That is the scariest part of the entire bag done, because as I say, if you mess this up, you need to make yourself a new flap. But I have my turn lock in. So I'm now going to show you the flap for the next bag and what you would do if you want to use a magnetic clasp instead of a turn lock like this. Okay, I am actually going to use a turn lock for this bag as well, but I was going to show you a magnetic clasp on the fishy bag that I was making, but I had to get that finished before Christmas for my dad's Christmas present. Which ended up being second Christmas present, but yeah, anyway. So with a magnetic clasp, what you're going to need is one of your flap pieces, and it needs to be your interior flap piece. As you can see, these are both the same, so it doesn't matter for me, but you need your interior flap piece. You're going to need the skinny part of your magnet closure, and this is the backing for it. You're also going to need a square of your heavyweight interfacing, and what you want to do is find the center of your inner flap piece and make a mark with your pen along there so that you've got the center marked. You're then going to want to iron your interfacing piece onto your flap. Once you've stuck that down, and if you've used a friction pen, you're going to need to remark your center. You're going to want to put the back of your magnetic closure onto the heavyweight interfacing that you've put on and make your marks, and make sure that the circle is over the center of the line that you've drawn. Then I personally, for these marks, I like to put my snips, the point of the snip at the end, and then just push through, and if you push the whole way through, you end up with, to about there on the blade, you end up with the right size. You end up with the right size hole for your prong to go through. So once you've done all that, you should end up with 2 holes, which you will then take your skinny magnet piece, push it through. Once that's through the fabric, you then want to put your backing piece on, and you want to fold these prongs outwards with the backing piece sandwiched between, with the fabric sandwiched between the backing piece and the magnet. You then carry on sewing your flap as I have just done, making sure that when you're stitching everything you don't hit any of the metal, because that would be bad and you will break a needle. Ask me how I know. So I've got my 2 finished flaps here, and I have made a wrist strap for both of them, so I need to add D-ring anchors to both of them. And this is the 3 by 6 inch piece that we made earlier, and we folded in half again, and then top stitched both sides down. You're also going to need your 2 D-rings, and I'm going to work on the parrot one. So this is way more than we actually need. So what you're going to do is thread your D-ring through your D-ring anchor, so it looks a little bit something like that, and then you want to place that on the inside bottom edge of your flap, and you're going to just baste that down along that edge there, cut off all of the excess and repeat so that you have another D-ring anchor on this side. So I've attached my 2 D-ring anchors, and there's probably about just over 1/4 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch from each side. They are literally just tacked on because we're going to sew to the main body part of the bag, which will then anchor these down permanently. So I judged the amount of fabric to include in these by eye, but I've just measured what I had left and it's 2 inches. So each one of these is around about 2 inches long. That should give you a bit better idea of what you're looking at. Just do it so that it looks right, and you're going to have 1/4 of an inch seam allowance to clear here. So the next thing that we're going to do is install the turn lock part of our locks onto the outside of our bags. And this is my outside of my directional print bag, and this is the outside of the non-directional print bag, and this one is the one that has no seam in it. What you want to do is find the centre. Find the centre of your bag, and then you're going to draw a line, a long line up there, and then you're also going to draw a line 2 inches up from this bottom piece and make a cross hatch. And you want those lines to be really big, especially if you're using a friction pen, which will go away with heat, because we're going to apply another square of our very heavy fusible interfacing to stabilize the prongs. And if you use heat, the friction pen will disappear. So nice long lines means that once you've pressed this down, you can then redraw your lines in without having to measure again. Now the pattern actually wants you to draw the cross line 2.5 inches. So 2.5 inches in from the bottom piece. I find that makes a bag that is a very tight close, whereas if you have it at 2 inches, it just gives that little bit extra room. And given that we've added the extra pocket so that you can put more things in it and you want to get your iPhone in there, I prefer moving the prongs slightly up to the 2 inch position. Once you've made one of these, you'll discover where if it's too tight for you, too loose for you, and you'll kind of like work out which is your best place to put your bag prongs. But for me, I think 2 inches works really well. So as I mentioned, my line's gone, but I can see the top bit here, so I'm just going to redraw that over there, redraw the 2 inch crosshatch, and then I'll show you how to mark where you want to make your holes. Okay, so the type of turn lock I'm using comes with this backing piece, and this is the lock. What I want to do, now this backing piece has 7 holes, but I want to, so I'm going to ignore the last hole and pretend there are 6. So I'm going to centre the middle, so there's 3 holes that side, there's the centre, 3 holes that side, and we're just going to pretend that last one doesn't exist. And I'm going to make a mark in the 1st and the 6th hole. So the marks I've made are the entire width of this hole, and as I said earlier, I like to use my sharp scissors, and I put the point in at the bottom and then push until the blade has made the hole the entire width of the mark that I have made. So I'm going to put my blade at the point of my blade at the end of the mark and push until the entirety of the blade has cut through, the width of the blade is cut through the entirety of the hole. So there we go, that's done. From the front, I'm going to add a little bit of fray check. Then I want to take the prongs of the turn lock, push them through so that they're coming through the holes, the 1st and the 6th opening on there, and then push these outwards. So you should end up with something that looks like that and like that. Okay, so now we need to find the correct position for our bag flap to go in. What I like to do is, so you want to have the right side of your bag facing up. You want to have the right side or the outside piece of your flap facing down. So if you have D-rings on, you'll see those. If you don't, you'll see the bits of the screws of your turn lock, and if you have a magnetic clasp, you'll see the inside of your magnetic clasp. So you want to put that on to the turn lock that you've just installed, And then I like to take a ruler, make sure it's on straight, and then I like to mark where the flap should go, because after all we are only human and it may not be absolutely dead center and precise, but this way, even if it's not dead center and precise, it will match up perfectly with your turn lock. The hole will match up with the turn part of your turn lock if you measure it out like that. So I'm then going to tack that down, base that on, and then we're going to sandwich the other part of our outer bag portion together and sew around. Okay, so once we've basted our flap on, you should end up with something that looks a lot like this, and we are then going to sandwich the flap in between the outer and inner bag pieces. This is the bit that has got the hole in the middle. Now if you've not snipped into your interfacing yet, you're going to want to just open up that hole so that we can get at it. Now you're going to pin those two together the whole way around and sew the whole way around at 1/4 inch. According to the pattern, they want you to leave an opening to turn the bag through. That's why we've made the hole in the middle, because we're going to turn our bag through this hole. Okay, so I have pinned the outer bag with the flap attached to it to the inner bag, which is the one with the hole in it, and as I said, we are going to sew the whole way around at 1/4 inch because we can turn our bag through this gap. Okay, so once you have sewn all the way around the edge, you want to notch your corners again. I'm going to do that with my pinking shears. Okay, so I have notched all of my edges. You won't be able to do around your flap, you won't need to because this is a flat area, but you are dealing with, if it'll focus, you are dealing with a lot of bulk in this area, so you won't be able to notch that with your pinking shears, and you don't need to because it is a flat surface. So what you want to do now is reach into the hole and pull your bag to the right side. Try not to bend the flap too much because you have the heavier weight interfacing in there, which you don't really want to crease too much. Even it all out, and there you have the outside of your bag. You can see all my toucans and parrots are the right way up, which is awesome. You need to press this. You need to press it. We're then going to add some more firm interfacing to it because, as you can see, it's very squishy at the moment, but we're going to press it first, then measure for the interfacing. Okay, so I've pressed everything nice and flat. When you're pressing, you want to sort of pull the flap up a bit so that you get as much of that as flat as possible. What we're going to do now is measure the flap, which for me is 7 3/4 wide, and then the bag itself is 8 1/4 deep. So I'm going to cut a piece of my super firm interfacing at 7.5 wide by 8 deep, and I'm going to again work with the curl in the interfacing to get the bag to roll into the right direction. We are on the home straight. So once you've cut your piece of thick interfacing, you want to insert it into your bag through the gap that you've made there, center it, and then you're going to top stitch the whole way around the edge of your bag. You do kind of have to, but it'll get there. Right, so once it's in, you want to make sure that it's centered inside of this flap and that it's lying flat. And as I said, you then want to top stitch the entire way around the outside of your bag. When I top stitch, I like to start over on one of these corners because these are going to get pinned in and smushed together, so it's not going to be quite as obvious if you start in the middle here, because this is something that you're always going to see. So I've top stitched everything and I have ended up with something that looks like this. And the reason that I have done things in this order is because all of the interior pieces are now finished, so we just get to assemble the bag. And for me, it feels like it comes together quicker that way. I know that's completely ridiculous and it is no quicker. It's just how my mind works. Makes me happy. So I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section down below. I will have listed all of the supplies and materials used in the description box, but if you can't see the answer there, just let me know in the comments and I will be happy to help. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!